There was an obvious but interesting thing. So Yoshi P sat down, talked about Final Fantasy,
Talked a lot about Final Fantasy.
and pointed out that people are having younger audiences are having a hard time engaging with the Final Fantasy series because the release intervals are so much longer these days. And it's
So
like,
there's a statistic that bears this out where remake and rebirth players, 80% of them were over the age of 30 years old.
77% um of rebirth players. That is a ridiculous uphill battle to get younger people to care about Final Fantasy again. That's locked in from our childhoods, right? That's a
Yeah. You know what the kids are into now, man? Fortnite and everything MiHoYo puts out. You know when those things come out?
all the time.
Every 6 weeks.
Okay, but also the other second part of this is that you truly, because of the way the industry is now, cannot have a release schedule like you used to. So you gotta have multiple games that you have a game that takes the moment and everyone is on it, and then when that's done, something else takes the moment entirely. Right? Arc Raiders is what's here now, taking the in the moment. Something else will come from somewhere else and try to peel people away. And there's these big things like Fortnite in the background and so on. And there are some institutions, Call of Duty has found its way of going about it. But back in, obviously, that the 90s into the early aughts, you had Final Fantasy games coming out every 2-3 years. And
So no, I actually ran the math on it. They came out on average every 14 months.
So it's just like
for like 12 years.
So there was a very good chance of people getting in by just keeping up with that shit. And we talked about the insanity of going from 6 to 7 and then going from 9 to 10 and so on, right?
In North America, it gets slightly more complicated because of like the missing entries, but
Yeah.
like in general,
Yeah.
like there was a new Final Fantasy game every single year you were in school.
Yeah. Now here's the problem. It is obviously impossible to expect and or push for 14-month turnaround on modern video games. And
I don't know if that's true.
well, asterisk. You certainly can if you A, crunch, or B, reduce your scope. But
Obsidian released a buggy fucking pile of shit, but they turned New Vegas around in like 22 months.
it feels,
If you made fucking smaller games that were shorter cheaper.
This is where I was going. Is just
also RGG puts out a game every 9 months
and using the same engine and
they just reuse the same shit every single time.
No, it's the story of the fucking podcast, but it's just like quadruple A bloat means that you don't get to have that type of turnaround that builds that type of love for a franchise over time and such, because it takes you that long to do the thing. And I would say that like Final Fantasy is hardly the only franchise that experiences that, right? Zelda is another thing where it's like there's usually 2 Zelda games per platform, but the life cycles that Nintendo has been going through have slowed down significantly, so like you don't get to go through as many Zelda games as we grew up going through, certainly.
Nope.
So anyway, all this to say that like, yeah, when it comes to like the ability to make, I guess, a sustainable franchise, if you're still gonna always go for the massive, the AAA size or the quadruple A size, then this is going to be a continuous problem. But the way that a lot of people that they're trying to capture now, that in this article they're describing, those people have grown up playing a thing and then have moved on to the next thing that came out or the next thing,
So I did a massive Blue Sky breakdown of like what years things would have come out. And the long and short of it is like, if you played FF15 halfway through high school, you might have been like cruising through university by the time 16 came out. And like, that's an era of your life away in distance. It's too much.
Right? Yeah.
Like an 18-year-old now has had like 4 Final Fantasy games come out.
I was I was trying to pull up the quick list, and it's like 97, 99, just going from 7, 2001,
there are 3 Final Fantasy games that came out in an 18-month period with 10, 11, 12.
2003 to 2006 with 12.
Sorry, 9, 10, 11.
Yeah. From 2006 to 2010 with 13. And then
you know who's actually doing
going.
A really good job of this extremely specific problem to video games? Is Resident Evil. Resident Evil has staggered new game and remake, and they've been ping-ponging each other. There's an 18 to 28 month like turnaround period where there's like kind of always a new Resident Evil game coming out.
Now,
there's a Resident Evil game either coming out this year or has been announced for next year since 7.
Now, Resident Evil, especially for the remakes, these are big, showy, expensive, but ultimately short game experiences.
Very short. They're games that are built on playing them multiple times in a row, over and over. I'm doing Resident Evil 9 Insanity, which I forgot to talk about.
Okay.
And that's my 4th full run of the game. And it is a very, very interesting run of the game because they're also remixing enemy encounters, which has led to scenarios of me going into, because I'm obsessed with these types of games, right? So I'm going through a hallway in a basement and I'm like, I have to run back to this safe room. So you know what would be really diabolical? If they spawn the unkillable enemy in front of me, which causes me to have to open this door, and then a zombie that didn't spawn on the earlier difficulty spawns to come out of that door to punish me. And as I was saying that shit, out that door he came.
Interesting. Yeah.
Enemy remix tweaks.
Yeah.
Bonus content, new game plus, speed run rewards.
Right.
It's a cheap way to add longevity to your game.
But that being said, Resident Evil is not a JRPG, right? Like,
no,
lengthwise. It would be interesting to see if like there ever could be a step backwards by anyone who's like escalated up in this industry in a way. Like, I mean, it feels like you just got to fall from grace all the way to the bottom.
Did Octopath Traveler do well? I think it did.
But you see, that's a new series that had to be created to do that, right?
Bravely Default did fine, didn't it? And Bravely Default might as well just say fucking Final Fantasy on it.
And that was a coming back from the dead, though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you could just do a bunch of fucking game, like every game that Square Enix puts out that looks like it could be an old Final Fantasy game, you could just call it Final Fantasy fucking Legend whatever.
But the point of what I'm getting at is that like the name that we're talking about, like when you give it the other things are like the other games like that, like Octopath and stuff that is like smaller and more reasonable and is a step down in a way. Like I'm curious to see if it's possible with the name, the big thing that everybody go, bro, that IP, you know, because it feels like you can't. I don't think that
name holds it like it did after 15 and 16 being mediocre.
And then the other question, of course, is like, you know, can you take a step down in a way where what you do doesn't basically have a bunch of people that are like, wait, how is this not bigger and bolder and crazier than the last one? This game sucks. What a piece of shit, right? Or to have it look, or people just say like, it looks like shit or whatever. If you're going for something that is like dialing back from this cliff.
What's the newest mainline Final Fantasy game that you played that you were like, this is obviously a Game of the Year contender? I feel like it's FF10 back in 2001.
I really liked 7 Remake.
I don't count it. It's a remake. I said new. Final Fantasy game. Some people might say 12. I personally disagree, but I can see it. But yeah, we're talking like
you gotta go. You gotta go back to the old. You gotta go back to the previous generations. Yeah. So no, but it ultimately though, it's when you have this kind of discussion about like, okay, thus let's start like if you go, how do we put out more Final Fantasy games faster so that people can relate to this franchise? It's like that is
Make them. Just make them.
okay. And do we trust the way that people get told to make things quickly to be done in a way that is not going to
No, here's
present
the thing,
a
Willie.
billion?
They're complaining about Final Fantasy brand awareness, but they also make a bunch of games that they could just call Final Fantasy. Octopath Traveler back in the 90s would be called Final Fantasy Gaiden.
Right. But they ultimately don't, and that's why Octopath is not part of what he's talking about when he says, "Hey,
yeah." So it's like if
people
you
are not recognizing the younger audiences are not playing it as much, because if they did play Octopath Traveler, then they played Octopath, which is a different thing.
Yeah.
You know. So that's kind of the deal.
So their plan to get the kids is release the mobile Dissidia game.
Yes, create a live service, create a mobile live service platform, and then hope that can fight
MiHoYo
against
can do it.
The Hoyo,
so can we.
Verse, you know. It's just the when it's as simple as just make it good go, make it fast go. It's like, I don't trust the assholes to not fucking either crunch, or there's always some bullshit they're gonna go about when it comes to this shit. We talk about it every single week. It's like they can't do it more frequently without some horrible downside being a part of that. If not just the quality dipping, then the amount of churn or the every other thing that goes wrong with every other major release we cover on a regular basis, right?
To be fair, the person that's being interviewed who gave this statement was Yoshi P, who we know doesn't do that stuff, but he also made a kind of mid Final Fantasy game. Yeah. And Dawn Trail is also kind of mid.
I just, when it comes to like, we don't get games as fast as we used to, and people are not attached to the brand as much as they used to be. And like, how can we do something about that? I go, well, be careful about how you solve that problem, because there's a lot of shitty ways you can.
Well, I have a solution. Do you want my solution? It's a genuine solution. I'm gonna hold up my hand. Okay, so I've been playing Kingdom Hearts 1, and it runs well, and it's a PS2 game, and I'm like, just make more of these. The PS2 could have been the technical end of all video games, and it would have been better for everyone.
Yes, and so that, what you just said, is what I was saying before, where I was like, the step down, what would that look like if they made a game that was what you just described? That's exactly what I mean when I say a step down. And I don't mean
just make PS2 games.
And I don't mean a sister franchise game, a new name, I mean like literally call it the same IP name and put it out there and go, yeah, we're doing this. And it looks like something from a previous gen or so, or whatever the case is, but it's a sustainable release and it's a good ass game. I wonder how that would be received. I would love to see that. I'd be curious to see if like there would be enough people that would just be like, yeah, this is fucking great rules. Word of mouth is going to help and carry this forward. Or if there is enough of a, larger audience, a casual pushback against something that doesn't look like it's current or whatever the case is. And then that leads to a bunch of other shit. I don't know. I would hope, I would imagine that considering how well indie games do and how much people are super down for shit that is, retro and solid, like that something could come out that would be received in this way, that would, and I think it would work, but I'd be curious if there were anything to point to as an example.
Do you remember the PlayStation The Best collection? It was what Greatest Hits was called in Japan.
Oh yeah, I've been making fun of that name for fucking 15 years now.
Square Enix should put out a series of games called Final Fantasy PS2 That Never Was Collection, and just pretend that these are PS2 games that never got released, and just make new games and they're PS2 games. Look, we found an old Final Fantasy game in our drawer. It's from the PS2.
Someone just brought up Pokemon.
Yeah.
And there's a franchise that stayed in its lane quite a bit for a very long time.
Now, there's a problem with Pokemon when we talk about these things. Because when you go, why don't you just do it like Pokemon? You're also saying, why aren't you as successful as the most successful thing that's ever existed in human history?
Well, yeah. The ridiculousness of trying to, no, you cannot be that. You're not. But it's more so the point of how often will a Pokemon game get released, and does it look like the how far from the first gen Pokemon game is the current release compared to how far these other franchises are with the 5,
Oh, they
6
come out
year
like
gaps,
that,
etc.
like bam, bam, bam.
Right, and they pretty much are like, they're not pushing the envelope that much. In fact, I want to say that those recently we started seeing some of those games where they're like, okay, this is a 3D game, okay, this has some more action mechanics, etc., the stuff that we've been talking about. But for the most part, they kind of stuck to it, and it
I'm
does
just thinking
fucking
like
sell.
this.
It sells every time. It sells every time.
I'm just thinking in my brain. I'm like, this conversation is like actually stupid. Like the whole conversation, because it's like the game I've been describing this whole time, I just had to say 360 game instead of PS2 game. And then they released it last year for $40 and it was called Expedition 33 and it won every award.
But that's the point. Like Expedition 33 is...
And they made it with like no money and like 30 people.
Expedition 33 represents, like as we've said many a time, a perfect medium space that you can actually sustainably execute on. And
like, just do that.
With critical acclaim and with the fact that shit's done well and it plays well and everything, you've got a fucking amazing legendary thing on your hands.
Square Enix, do you not have a team that is as talented as these French amateurs? It's like a Tony Stark built this shit with a pile of scraps moment.
I think that there's a fear, and it's stupid, but I think there's a fear of, like, if Expedition 33 was just called Final Fantasy, there's a fear of, like, well, this is not bigger and bolder and louder than the last thing we did.
No, it's just better.
Can't, yeah, and it's not, and we don't have a million preload pre-order bonuses, and we don't have a million, you know what I mean? Like, the bloat of the machine and the fact that there's all these people on these games with the numerical entry, that's this massive insane thing. Like, it comes with all that shitty bloat and all that shitty churn, and
I remember talking to you,
the resistance would come with that
ages ago about Blizzard and Square, that period where Blizzard and Square Enix were just like throwing every dollar they had in the world at we're going to have the nicest CG cutscenes between them, right? Like, which Warcraft cinematic versus what Final Fantasy cinematic was come out.
FF10.
And Blizzard ultimately crushed them in that war because Square Enix would spend all that money on those cutscenes and then also on the in-game graphics. And then Blizzard would like get like 4 triangles together and say it was a troll.
Yeah. Yeah. Also,
and have a guy with a Jamaican accent talk over it.
I mean, also, and Blizzard, like, while Square eventually got there, Blizzard made the MMO platform moneymaker, it prints money thing first, and then all they had to do was just sit on top of that.
And it's like, I'm thinking about, like, Square Enix says that Final Fantasy has become trapped and it has to look like the best game that's ever existed. And it's like the most successful game you guys ever put out, accounting for the era in which it released, was the game that had cool cutscenes and looked like a bunch of little Popeye freaks running around.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's like, yeah, we know this, and it would take somebody that they'd be willing to listen to go in and boldly be like, shut the fuck up. We're not doing this stupid shit. We don't need to. Right. But there's a prison that they have created of, we are AAA. We must be AAA. We are every time
bleeding edge to AAA.
We have to hold this seat, and everyone who's like in that, whether it's an Assassin's Creed game or any of the COD fucking blops or like anything that is in that space, it feels like there's just this invisible, like, not real prison of, we must always continue to be this bloated. This is what a video game is, and this is the only way that casual people are going to buy and get our game and talk about it.
You know what's really weird to me about Yoshi P talking about this is that Yoshi P, the way he handles managing the FF14 team and what they focus on and what they plan for and what comes out is extremely structured. It's super, super specific to the point where people can look at a trailer and call the date of when stuff's going to come out. It's very, very regimented. And then they took like 5, 6, 7 years to make FF16, and we're like, it has to look like the graphics have to be incredible. It has to be this and that. And it's like, it's not even to his own production strengths. But because it's Final Fantasy 16, it has to be the biggest and the most peak and the gorgeousest.
So the silver lining that I can envision here is that the quadruple A mind prison, if it continues to exist and destroy whatever is inside of it because none of this shit is sustainable and it all burns down, then fine. Smaller games from smaller studios and indies and such that are coming up that are getting more and more known can then,
like Crimson Desert,
those can become series and IPs that the younger audiences can attach to and and they will execute and make things that are smaller scale that they can afford to make, as opposed to trapping yourself in the fucking, the stupid non-real pressure of like why you have to of making a game that's too big to be maintained, and then why you have to fucking fire 1,000 people every time a game releases. It's like the problem will fix itself, but the thing that people start playing a bunch of and caring about might not be the Final Fantasy franchise then, if they move on to the Claire Obscure franchise, or whatever the thing ends up being. There is also I don't like 14-month turnaround thing. That's that 14-month is the KOTOR 2 god damn it.
Well, the 14-month turnaround for Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy 1, Final Fantasy 2, Final Fantasy 3, Final Fantasy 4, etc.
The 14-month turnaround also to me is fucking King of Fighters 11, or rather King of Fighters 96, 97, 98, and then you're like, you got some fucking bangers out there, but then not all of those were some years were way better than others, and on average every 3 or so years you had a fucking good one. So
I think the Final Fantasy development nonsense is really summed up by the difference between the production of FF7 with all its cutscenes and FF6, where they're making FF6 and they finished it so early that they had 6 months to do the entire World of Ruin as a bonus. The game was going to end on the floating continent. And then they're like, oh, wow, we have tons of time before our release date. Let's do a whole second continent.
Whatever generation you're in, whatever scale you're at, I think people can enjoy, be satisfied with, and still feel attached to something that comes out every 3-4 years. I think that's reasonable. I think back in a time when generation turnarounds were a lot faster too.
You remember when there was a Persona game coming out? Or an SMT game coming out every 6 months? Do you remember that? That highly specific period in 2002?
One or the other. Oh, early aughts. I mean, God.
Where they were like, hey, it's Shin Megami Tensei. Yeah. And we all laughed because it was a marketing ploy, and it super fucking worked. It worked really fucking hard.
And also, that was a time when whatchamacallit, were companies that were making games for arcades just simultaneously developed multiple games on multiple fronts, and fighting game shit was multiple in a year from almost the same teams, it felt like at times. The insanity of the late 90s release schedule. Not something that necessarily should be emulated or, brought back, but certainly there's a happy medium we can find of a couple years working on a project and not blowing it too big or or making it too insane, and also keeping it affordable and keeping the scale reasonable.
I think it's really obvious that management is where all the money in this business goes. Every single time we see oh, how come this game took so long and cost so much money? It's because producers and directors just weren't doing it, or they weren't telling people what to go, or there was some stuff from Sony, forget which studio it was, so feel free to take this with a massive grain of salt, but they were everyone had every single change had to go through the director, but the director would leave you on red for 3 months.
Oh God, the bottleneck auteur.
So I know that specific example, I might be misremembering it, but I know that that's a very common thing in a lot of places.
Yeah, what was I just gonna say? I was gonna say something about the Not the turnaround rate, not the scale, but yes, that's it. It feels like it would be easier to summarize here. It feels like it would be easier for massive publishing company to um, have a person who takes a mid-sized game that's a huge success, and then that person continues to work on more sequels or more in that franchise and keeps it the same scale than it would be to take something that bloats the fuck up, goes uphill, and then try to pull it back. You
You
know?
know, it's a really good example of this. When they were interviewed after they won all those awards, Guillaume was like, "Yeah, the tendency for a game to do this well is to staff up and make the next game really big. We're not going to do
No,
that.
no, no,
The
no,
next game
no.
will be about the same."
Yep. They got knighted, man. You know?
Yeah.
Anyway. Um so that, yeah, that is an interesting Yoshi P interview.